Alright, hello once again. This is Jeff Scott, and I've been going over HTML5 and CSS3 courtesy of Murox HTML5 and CSS3 3rd edition. We're into section 2 of the text, and in particular we're going to go over chapter 10 right now, which is how to work with tables. Over the years, there's been kind of I'm trying to think of the right word. Not a fascination, but the opposite, a disfascination with tables. Tables used to be used for just about everything. In fact, quite often when you had people who created some kind of a master file or a master template to create their website, they put everything into a table. And in those tables, they quite often had other tables. That has very much fallen out of favor today. And the idea is today you use a table if you want to express tabular or table data. And that's really the only thing you should use it for. So in here we want to use HTML to create tables with merge cells, captions, headers, and footers. Use CSS and CSS3 structural pseudo classes to format created tables. Use the HTML5 figure and fig caption elements to treat a table like a figure. Use HTML to provide accessibility for tables. Describe the following table components: rows, columns, cells, header cells, data cells, table header, table footer, and table body. Describe the proper use of tables now that CSS is used for page layout, and that's kind of what I just did. Describe the use of nesting and unwrapping with tables. Describe the use of table attributes for accessibility. Now here's an example of a table. Alright, you can see that this table has 3 columns, one that's entitled Book, one that's entitled Year Published, and one that's entitled Sales. Alright, those headings at the top, you can see, are put in a different color. The headings at the bottom, which say Total Sales, nothing under the year published, and $2,154,786 for sales, alright, that's also in a different color. Typically what this is going to mean is this right here where it says total sales by book, that is a table caption. These are the TH or the table headers. The stuff in white are the TDs or the table data, and the stuff down on the bottom here is the T-foot or the footer area. Alright, so when we look at this terminology as shown in your book on page 351, the table tag defines the table, and the slash table tag, of course, ends it. TR defines a table row. TH defines a table header. TD defines table data. So a table consists of rows and columns that intersect, and the intersection of a row and a column is known as a cell. The cells that contain data are known as data cells. The cells with the header information are known as header cells. The header for a table can consist of more than one row, and the footer can consist of more than one row. It's also possible to create a table without a header, although that would make it harder to figure out the reason for the header, for the table rather, but you can also have a table without a footer. The body of the table contains the data and normally consists of at least a couple rows or more. By default, the width of each column in the table is determined automatically based on the content of the widest element. By default, the content of the table header element is bold-faced and centered, where your table data stuff by default is left aligned. So in other words, if we grab all the information that you see right here, and I'm going to do that. Now, this won't look like it does, at least right now it won't look like it does in the book because there's no CSS. But as always, I'm going to come in here, create a brand new file as we've done, put in my doc, you know the rule, the scenario by now. Doc type HTML, our HTML tag, our head tag. I like to put a title in here and say this one can be HTML tables. And my head tag. Again, if I had some CSS, I would be putting it right in there, either directly in a style tag or I'd be linking it. Here's my body. Here's the end of my body. And here's my ending HTML tag. All right, so I'm going to come in here and I'm going to paste in that table. All right, so there it is. I'm going to format this a little bit as far as spacage. Whoops. Again, I like to do this the way I like to do it. All right, so they don't have all the stuff in here. I don't like the way the author has done this, so I'm going to change it and actually put all of the data in there. So you'll have to bear with me, if you would please, for just a minute so we can see what all of this is going to look like when we're done. All right, I'm going to copy this one, and where we've got this, I just don't like this thing. I'm going to get rid of that. All right, and I'm going to copy this, which I believe was that first data cell, and put it in there 4 times. Now, I've got my book in front of me, so I can put in this information based on what was in the book. All right, so we had PHP and JavaScript. I'm sorry, PHP and MySQL, which you see right there. All right, so there's our first one. The second one is JavaScript and jQuery. These are all titles of Muroc books. And this is 2015. I think these are published dates. And this is 305,447. All right, then next we have Java programming. That will be 2011. And the amount for that is 392,444. And finally, we have Java servlets and JSP. That will be a 2014 book also, it looks like. And that's 328,992. All right, so that's everything I need. I'm going to save that. And for now, I'll just save it to the desktop. Or try to. This is hung. That's not a good sign. There we go. Desktop. And this will be our index.html. All right, so let's run this. Again, not nearly as nice looking as what you see in the book. All right. Notice that the header that you see and the footer that you see are both centered. All right. And notice that all of the text that's in here is left justified. All right, so you can see that. Now, it looks like what I want is for this heading here and this heading here, both of those, I want those both to be left justified. All right, plus I want a border around my table. So let's talk about how to do that. Well, first thing is for my table, if I put in here border equal 1, now I'll get a 1 pixel border around everything. That's the first thing. And here we've got class equal left. Well, the problem with putting that class equal left in there for those titles, all right, and putting all that stuff in there is that is expecting, I guess, that I'm using a CSS class, which I'm not. But with just the changes we've made, if we look at what we have right now, it's looking a little bit more like it does in the book. It sure as heck is not perfect. All right, but we'll see if we can make some changes to it as we go on. Okay, all right. So I just showed you how to create a table. And again, if we take a look at the way this is, we've got a TH element in there. That TH element, all right, that TH element means table header. But for accessibility reasons, typically what you do is you style and you put in a T head, a T body, and a T foot in your table. All right, so what do I mean? Well, right here, I'm going to put a T head right there. And I'm going to end my T head right here. All right, which says that's my heading section. This will be my T body section, which starts right here. And it ends right here. And finally, this will be my T foot section. Right there. And it will end right here. Now, something that you may or may not find incredible, but take a look at how much this changes when I click that. That was meant to be funny. It doesn't change at all. All right? So the T head, T body, and T foot make it easier to style a table, but you don't actually have to put them in. You can code them in any sequence, and that's changed over time because it used to be that you had to put the T foot before the T body, but I guess you don't have to do that anymore. All right? So let's talk about some CSS skills and CSS that you might want to put into a table like this one. You've already seen what the ending product should look like, and we're going to build a CSS file in just a minute. So I grabbed all that information. That was my table. And you saw what it looked like. All right, then we put the T head, the T body, and the T foot in, and it didn't change at all. Still looks the same. Now we're going to talk about some of these properties that you may want to dink with using CSS, such as border collapse. And that determines whether space exists between the borders of adjacent cells, and if they're collapsed to a single border between cells. You can have collapse and separate, or separate, and separate is the default. You can have border spacing. And with border spacing, a relative or absolute value here will specify the space between cells when borders are not collapsed. Padding, which is the space between the cell contents and the outer edge of the cell. Text align, which is the horizontal alignment of text. And vertical line, which is the vertical alignment of text. All right, now, with that in here, on the next slide here, they show this is the CSS. All right, whoops, sorry, oh, come on. Now I goofed up here. Where am I? That's where we want to be. So I want to grab this right here. I want to grab this CSS. We can go over it if you want in just a second. All right. And let's put it in the file first. Let's pretty it up a bit, the way that I pretty it up a little. Again, my files end up being bigger, but to me they're much more self-documenting and they're much easier to read, writing them the way in which I write them. You may or may not agree. Ideally, when you're learning this stuff, you should be coding for understandability, so understandability on your part. All right, whoops, I lost my font weight there. And I lost the ending curly, so what did that say on here? It said font weight bold and then my curly, so. All right, I'm going to just call this table.css. And then I have to include that in here, which I'm not doing right now. So again, I have to put in my link tag. And I can either say rel equals style sheet, then the href, or I can say the href, and then the rel equals style sheet. Either way. Works just fine. Let's see if we've changed our table. Okay? Looks much more similar to what we saw at the beginning of the chapter. Now, let's take a look at the actual code that we put in here. All right, we said we wanted a border around it that would be 1 pixel solid black. So since we're putting it in there, where I put the border in here, it's no longer necessary. Okay? And as you notice, even though I took it out, when I refresh, it still is there because it's been put there by the CSS. All right. We want the border collapse to be set to collapse. For our table header and our table data, we want a pixel around that. We want a little bit of padding, and we want the text to be right aligned. All right, that means whether they're, regardless of what's in there, you know, whether it's number or non-number, we want that to be right. And this class that we're putting in for table headers and table data of left just says align stuff to the left. Our footers and headers, T-head and T-foot, that's where we got that aqua color. And our footer is also bolded. Quite often you do things like that because, again, notice what's in here is monetary type of stuff. So in HTML5, the attributes that were commonly used for formatting tables have been deprecated. So really you should use CSS for virtually all of your formatting. All right, so keep that in mind. So there's the table in the browser. There it is without collapsed borders. See the difference? All right. Then let's talk a little bit about some of this syntax that's shown on the page here. Nth child. Well, literally with an nth child, what that's doing is it allows you to count your way down and find the child of a parent. You can find the nth child of a parent counting backwards by using the nth last child, the nth of type, all right, with a parent, and the nth of type counting backwards. I did a presentation for a different class that I went over this stuff, and I think what I'll try to do is find that presentation and put it out here also. The typical values where you see the n in there are shown here. Odd. Now remember, the first number is 0, so 0 is actually considered an odd, which means 1 is an even, 2 is an odd, etc. Even, n for nth child, 2n, which is the same as even, 3n, which is every third element, 2n plus 1, which is the same as odd, and every third child, which is 3n plus 1. So we could have formatted that table like this, without using classes, but used it like this. These are the CSS3 structural pseudo classes that allow you to format a table without using classes or IDs. And to many, this is the way it should be done today. So let's do this. All right, so I'm going to come in here and put in this, everything that you see right there. I'm going to come back here to where we have this. All right, and where do we use classes? Well, anything that starts with a dot, so there we did. All right, so let's come down here and look at what we have. All right, we've got first child of both should be text aligned. And the nth child over there should be centered. All right, and the body should have a background color of silver. All right, so now what I want to do is I want to go back into the file here, and where I'm using class equal left, all those places where you see where they're class equal anything. All right, I'm going to go and grab that line. There's different ways of doing this. For right now, the easiest way, I'm just going to say class equal. I'm going to remove the word left, so there is no class. All right, I'm going to save this, and now I'm going to refresh. and most of it doesn't look different. It looks like this is now right justified. All right? But the bottom line is this. I've got all this stuff in here, and I've done it using the CSS structural classes. Now, sometimes you want to come in, and when you're working with this stuff, you want to go in and you want to take, there was the table, okay? You want to take a table and you want to use it as though it's a figure. So the figure element can be used as a container for anything that's used as a figure, including a table. The fig caption element can be used within a figure to provide a caption that describes the figure, but it's optional. By default, the fig caption is an inline element, although you can use HTML caption element to provide a caption for the table. It's better semantically to use the figure in the fig caption. So, I'll tell you what we're going to do. Again, what I'm trying to show you is what I think is a good way to learn. So I'm going to grab everything that was in my index, and I'm going to put it back and put it into index 1. Right? Then I'm going to come back to here, and every place where I have the class equal left, I'm going to put that back in again. You'll see why, hopefully, in just a minute. Alright, so those 6 lines have been put back in. So that's index, and that is going to be calling table. Now this table, I'm also going to copy. I'm going to throw it into here. Then I'm going to go back to my table, my original table.css, and all that stuff that we just added, with the first child, etc., I'm going to get rid of all that. Okay, so now that's gone. So now my index, my original one, should be back again. There it is. All right, so that's my original one. Now, I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to go back to this new one I just added, and I'm going to add table2.css. I now have all those, they're back to double quotes, that left in there is out. I'm going to come over here, and everywhere where I use the class, so the dot, anywhere with a dot here, I'm now going to remove that. So now I have table, tht, etc., but I have nothing in here that I can see that's using a class. So now I want to save this one, file, save as, and we'll save this one as index2.html, and we'll save this here, as we already mentioned, as table2.css. All right, now let's bring this up. All right, so here is my index 2. In fact, let's do it like this. There's my index 2, and here will be my index 1. All right. Oh, I don't have an index 1. It'll just be index. So there it is with the classes. There it is. All right. So you see the differences? Okay, I guess that we had striping in here that we didn't have in the other one. But other than that, they look the same. Now, let's do it one more time. So let's grab the second table that we just created, copy it to the clipboard, paste it in. This time we're going to use table 3 in here. That's the only thing that's going to change in here. All right, so again, that will be table3.html. And then we're going to grab our CSS file, copy that in, and create a new one. And that's going to be, you probably guessed it already, table3.css. All right, but what we want to do is we virtually want to get rid of I think we want to just add this stuff on the bottom here. So let's see. Let's look. So we want to use this stuff for the figure, fig caption elements. And I guess I didn't put that in. I wanted figure around this. And all of these should have said, that should have said fig caption. So let's add that. So we're going to put a figure before the entire table. And right after the end of the table, we're going to put our ending figure tag. So that's part of it. And we also want to come in here and put in this fig caption where it says total sales by book right before the table. Now, normally I would come in here and start doing some of the stuff that I'm about to show you. That is tab, 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 etc. So the stuff has got a little bit more structure to it, at least than it currently has. You can see what goes with what. To me, that's a much better way of writing. In fact, that table, that T head would go there, so I can really move all these over a couple times. I like a space between the head and the body like that. Space between the body and the footer. Okay, so that's how I would set mine up. It's now laid out much, much, much nicer than it was. It's not going to look a lick different, just so you know that. Not a bit. Alright, but let's go over to here. Now I want to do two things. First I want to come over here where we have all this figure, all the CSS stuff. And as you'd guess, I want to grab all of it, copy it to the clipboard, come in here, but what I'm first going to try is to remove everything that's in here and just put in that stuff and see if this actually is going to set this up the way that we want it set up, or if it's not. So it might look like a little bit of a cluster, and if it does, we'll go and add that stuff back again from the previous CSS. It's no biggie one way or the other. It really and truly is not. And see how fast you can move around and do this stuff. Alright, so let's take this and open it up. Okay, well that sure doesn't look very good, does it? So we'll put the other stuff in. Interesting to see that. Alright, but I'm going to try to put the other stuff in, and once I do, then hopefully that'll fix this stuff back up. So I'll go back to table 2, copy all that, go back to 3, go back up to the top here, hit enter a couple times. Oops, I don't think. Yeah, paste that back in, good. So I've got all that back in again. Now, I don't know if I made it better or worse, but let's look. Alright. I don't know what that is at the bottom. Alright, why that thing is in there at the bottom, but everything else looks the way that it should be looking. Don't know what that thing is at the very bottom. Alright, after total sales. So the figure element can be used as a container for anything, again, that can be used as a figure. Just remember that. Alright? But I'm going to go back to this just before I finish this. I'm going to go back to this and look at, see what's at the very bottom, if anything. Table, oh, slash figure. That would probably help. So let's see if that fixed it. Oh, that looks a little nicer now, doesn't it? So that looks now the way that it does in the book on page 359. Alright. So let's talk about how we can merge different things in tables. All right? For complicated tables, it might make sense to merge some cells. And this will be shown on the next picture here. Okay, so you can see that. And to do that, you typically take advantage of the col span and row span attributes. The col span attribute identifies the columns that the cell will span. The default's 1. Row span is how many rows the cell will span. And again, the default is 1. All right? So they do give an example. I'm not going to go through this because it's just starting to get too much to type. But they show an example of what it would look like, and then the HTML you'd use with a col span. So notice that's going, this is going over, for example, this sales is spanning 1, 2, 3, 4 rows. All right? This book, the sales is spanning 1, 2, 3, 4 columns, and the word book is spanning 2 rows. All right? Now again, you never have to do anything like that, but quite often people like to do things like that because it can help for aesthetic type of reasons. All right. Let's talk a little bit about accessibility. Remember that someone might be using your table who might be sight impaired, might be hearing impaired, might be motor skill impaired, or have some kind of other impairment. So things that you might want to add. First is a caption. The caption describes the contents of the table. The other alternative is to treat the table as a figure and use the fig caption. All right? Headers. Headers identify one or more header cells that describe the content of a cell. And scope, which is a keyword that tells if a cell is associated with a column or with a row. The common keywords are col and row. You don't have to use them, but again, the more you do this, yes, it is more work at the beginning. But you're taking the table and making it more accessible to any kind of an impaired user. And that's typically why you're going to do it. It's not that it's going to look any different. All right? All right. It's also possible to nest tables, to put a table into another table. You can nest one table within another table by coding a table element within an ID element. Nested tables are frequently used when tables are used for page layout. Now the table should only be used for tabular layout data. You should rarely, if ever, need to use nesting. All right, so it's not that you can't use it, but most people now choose not to use it. All right, by default, the contents of a cell in a table will wrap to 2 or more lines, as you see right here. If you size the browser window. If you don't want that to happen, you can use the whitespace property to prevent that from happening. And there it is, whitespace no wrap. So you can use the whitespace property to keep the table from wrapping if the table doesn't properly fit into the browser window. All right, you can code it for an entire table or for individual cells. So this chapter was designed to show you how to create and format simple tables. Again, tables today should only be used for tabular data. Please remember that. All right, that's pretty much it for this chapter. When we get into the next chapter, which is chapter 11, it's one of the largest chapters in the book, just so you're aware of that. Not that that matters or anything, but it has a lot of PowerPoints, so I might have to break it up, into 2 different lectures. Okay, I want to come in here and I want to create a folder and call it Chapter 10. And then grab all of this stuff that I did here. Put it in there. Put that in there. And then put that in there. In Chapter 11, we're going to be talking about forms, just so you know that. All right? And don't know if it's going to show it right here or not, but if we go into the become a member, no, About us. Nope. Let's see. Get tickets. Nope. All right. Ideally, somewhere in here, we're going to be building a form. Okay? Again, this is a lot longer chapter than the previous chapter was. I'll be back with that chapter shortly.